Let's talk about the history of the Nike Air Max. I absolutely love Nike Air Maxes, and so do sneakerheads all over the world. Before I do anything, I'm going to throw on this pair of Air Max 360s. They're from 2007. I picked them up at a Nike outlet for $59.99. For many years, I ran around to different Nike outlets buying shoes, and I'd always pick up a pair here or there for myself, and that was the case with this pair. Love these shoes. I feel like I'm walking on air when I'm wearing them. I actually wore this exact pair of shoes for the guided tour video of the ShoeZeum, and I also wore a pair of Air Max 360s when the Nike executives came and visited me. So the Air Max 360 was actually 20 years into the history of the Air Max, and what I want to do now is break down those first 20 years for you. On January 26, 2006, Nike released a pack of 8 shoes, and they were the first Air Maxes. Here is actually the very first Air Max shoe, but the pack consists of various Air Maxes that show the evolution and innovation of this incredible line of kicks. So what exactly is an Air Max? Well, a Nike Air Max is going to be any shoe that has a visible air window on it. So when you look at the heel or sometimes the front of a shoe and you see that visible air window, it's going to be a Nike Air Max. The shoes came out originally in 1987. They were designed by Tinker Hatfield and they were inspired by the Georges Pompidou Center in France. These shoes completely changed the sneaker game. And what we'll see over time with the evolution of the Air Max is that the air bubble gets bigger from one shoe to the next shoe to the next shoe. So I'm going to put this pair over here on the side, and I'm going to grab the next model that came out in this incredible pack of kicks. Wow, these are just amazing. The mesh, the red suede, it's hard to not fall in love with this pair of shoes. The next pair of Air Maxes from the history of Air Pack is the Air Max 90, and this is the infrared colorway, which is the original colorway of the Air Max 90. They first came out in 1990. They were also designed by Tinker Hatfield. Tinker really had his hand in a ton of these amazing shoes that completely changed the sneaker game. But this shoe is going to be a more aggressive version of the previous Air Max. You'll see it has that same visible air window, and this visible air window is going to be a little bit bigger than the one on the previous model. You'll also see the plastic on the back, on the front, and on the side of the shoes. I always thought that the plastic on the heel sort of looked like a heart, but again, I'm in love with Nike, so it's not surprising that when I look at a pair of Air Maxes, I'm seeing hearts. My dad used to run in these shoes when I was a little kid, and that's one of the things that really made me fall in love with Nikes, is I used to go to the sneaker store with my dad, and we were so excited on the weekends to go and pick up these shoes, and my dad would teach me about these amazing shoes, and each model would come out and he'd pick it up and he'd say, George, look at this, the air bubble's bigger on this than it was on that, and my dad would buy all of the size 12s that they had in stock. Remember, this was like way before the internet, so there wasn't really a chance to just keep buying shoes like there is today. You just could buy what was at your local sneaker shop. Over here is a beautiful pair of Air 180s. This is known as the ultramarine color, and just like all of the other shoes in the pack, it's going to be in the same original color scheme as what it first came out as. So the big innovation with this shoe, again, was that visible air window. And you can see it from underneath, from the sole of the shoe. You can actually see the air. And this was very innovative. Nothing like this had ever happened before. And the reason why it's called the 180 is because you can see the air 180 degrees around. There's an amazing video about this shoe, the technology behind the shoe, and the launch on YouTube. You can search for Air 180 Nelson Ferris. Nelson's one of the first Nike employees. He came and visited the ShoeZeum and actually had a computer on display next to these kicks, and you could just push the space bar and it had Nelson's interview playing for people that came to the ShoeZeum. So imagine I'm walking Nelson down the aisle of Air Maxes. We walk up to this shoe, I hit the space bar, and it's him in an interview, and he's watching himself with me, and he goes, hey, that's me. And he was like so proud that he was featured in the ShoeZeum. I was like, of course it's you, man. Like, you're one of the first Nike employees. So anyway, my dad loved these shoes. He ran his best marathon in this pair of shoes. It was just over 3 hours. He was just an incredible runner. My dad's still around this day, don't get me wrong, and he's super proud of what I've been able to curate with my love and passion for sneakers, which began as a kid because of his running. The next shoe in the history of Air Pack is the Air Max 93. Now, when this shoe first came out, it was known as the Air 270 because if you look at it, it's actually got air going 270 degrees all the way around the heel, and that had never happened before this shoe. Another big innovative thing about this pair is going to be this tongue, which is very similar to the Air Hirachis that were coming out at the same time. And actually the Air 180 is sort of the predecessor to that neoprene tongue that just grips onto your foot, and it feels like you're wearing a pair of socks, but then you're walking on air. So over here is going to be 1987, 90, 91, 92, and then 93. And you can see the air getting bigger from one shoe to the other. Let's talk about the rest of the shoes in this pack. The next shoe, the Air Max 95. People love the Air Max 95s. These are cosmetic seconds. You can see on the box there's a stamp. It says cosmetic seconds, B grades. I scored this pair of kicks at Camarillo Nike factory store for $59.99, along with 22 other pairs. The store got in 24 pairs. A couple of associates kept 2 of them, and I came all the way from San Diego and scooped up the rest of them. So here's the Air Max 95. This was the first Air Max where you've got visible air at the back of the shoe and at the front of the shoe. And when the Air Max 95 first came out, it actually had PSI written underneath the sole of the shoe to tell you how much air was in the various parts of the shoe. They've since abandoned the PSI stuff, but they still make these shoes over and over and over again. So the really cool thing about this pair of shoes, well, there's a lot of really cool things about this pair of shoes. First and foremost, you'll notice that there's really not a big swoosh on the shoe at all. And that's very different from the previous models. They still sold incredibly well, and people knew that they were Air Maxes and Nikes, and they didn't have to use that big, bold Nike swoosh, which you see on the previous models. The thing about this pair of shoes that a lot of sneakerheads don't know is that it was inspired by the human body. If you look down here, you'll see this plasticky part on the sole, and that's the spine. It's supposed to be the human spine. Over here, these different graduated layers are supposed to be your muscle fibers. You'll see the yellow lacelets here, and that's going to be the rib cage, and then this breathable mesh upper is supposed to be like the skin. So it was inspired by the human body. People wear these all the time, and they have no idea the story, the history, the heritage. And that's why I'm here, because I want to bring these shoes to life and teach the whole world what I know and love. So let's go on to the next Air Max shoe. This is my absolute favorite pair of shoes, hands down, period. And people are surprised. People always ask me, what's your favorite pair of shoes? And this is them. It's the Air Max 97. I'm looking at these 95s wobbling. I think they're going to hold up. The Air Max 97 originally came out in 1997, no surprise there, and it was inspired by Japanese silver bullet speeding race trains. And you can see the sleek upper here. Again, this has a very little swoosh. It's got more swoosh branding than the previous 95 model, but not like the previous models here. And obviously, you've got this 3M reflective upper, which is super futuristic. I remember when this shoe first came out, I was going to college at the University of Arizona, and they didn't have any pairs of 97s at my local sneaker shop. So I called up Sporty LA. I've been shopping there ever since I was a kid, and Ellie, the owner of the store, actually sent me a pair in size 13, which is a size and a half too big. I didn't even care. I wore them happily with 2 pairs of socks, and I just thought they were so futuristic and cool. The really big innovation here is the full air bubble. Here you've got a full air bubble going all the way around the shoe. And when they made this shoe, I thought, wow, Nike really nailed it. There's really nowhere else that Nike can go from here to put more air in the shoes. Like, literally, we'll have to be hovering on them as that shoe hovers there in front of me. I was wrong. Nike continued to put more and more air in the shoes. So, the next shoe from the pack, shoe number 7, is the Air Max 2003. Here it is. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this shoe because, to be honest with you, I'm kind of surprised that they included this in the history of Air. It really doesn't have anything that's so crazy innovative like these other shoes in front of them, but they included it in the pack, so obviously I had to have it in the collection, and we'll put it on display with the previous 6 shoes in the history of Air. And then the Air Max 360. Check out this box. Before I even saw the shoe, I fell in love with the box. Notice how there's like this faint Nike shoe and a visible bright Air window. Look at the posters behind me. Those are the original posters for the first Air Max. So here we are 20 years later doing the same thing, really to draw attention to the Air, which was the big innovation here. This is the colorway that I wore when Mark Parker and Tinker Hatfield and Eric Sprunk and Michael Lemming and all these top executives came and visited me. So the very first pair of Air Max 360s, let me spin one around slowly so you can see the air bubble. Look at that. It's just nothing but air. And again, go back 10 previous years or so to the 97, and I thought there's never going to be more air than what they've got here, and boom. Nike proved me wrong. So this shoe is actually supposed to be somewhat of a hybrid of the Air Max 1, the 95, the 97. There's bits and pieces of each of those shoes. On the upper, for example, the way the laces go right here is similar to the 95. The bright red around the side is going to be like the Air Max 1. I mean, you know, maybe you need to use a little imagination to see it, but this shoe is supposed to be made up of the previous pairs. So the Air Max 360 came out. It released along with all of these other shoes. At the time, I couldn't even afford any of them. But I went to Foot Locker that day just to see them and visit them and see other sneakerheads coming and buying those shoes. And so here you have the first 20 years or so of the Air Max. And before I let you go, I just want to break out the most recent Air Maxes, which are the 2013 model. And I've already said twice before that I don't see how Nike could possibly put any more air in the shoe. And here's where we're at now. They have pretty much removed the plastic altogether from the midsole, and you just have this full visible air bubble. The reason I held the shoe here is because I wanted you to compare it to what at the time was considered the biggest Nike Air possible. So there you have the pivotal shoes in the history of Air Pack, along with the most recent Air Max 2013. There's really no more room for me to stack any more shoes, so I hope you've enjoyed this video.